Now that we're done reading Hamlet, I want to spend some time looking at Hamlet in the final analysis. And so this presentation is a argument for Hamlet's heroism based in his view of death, plus some stuff about metacognition. Hamlet as a character is going to challenge some of our pre-existing notions of what a hero is. He's not a particularly brawny guy. He's a good sword fighter, but we don't see him doing anything that we would say is like Marvel Universe heroic. He doesn't save the world. He doesn't particularly offer any kind of crazy sacrifice of himself for some greater good. Instead, Hamlet's heroism, what I am arguing, is understood in the realm of thinking. As a thinker, Hamlet is intellectually courageous and adventurous. He's willing to explore some things about human existence that many of us do not want to explore. And in his willingness to do that, we benefit from somebody who is able to question some things about our existence, some facts of our existence that we perhaps don't look into as deeply as we should. A huge measure of the heroism of Hamlet's intellect is his ability to be self reflective. Throughout the play, Shakespeare is going to ask us to think not just about Hamlet's actions, but to also think about Hamlet's thinking, which sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo because it kind of is. But there's a word for it called metacognition, which is thinking about thinking, or trying to have an understanding for the ways in which we approach problems and the how of our thinking. So to look at this a little bit, there's kind of two key ideas that I want to set up about Hamlet's metacognition, or Hamlet's thinking about his thinking. The first thing is that he is well aware of the fact that he is seeing the world differently because of his grief. We've said this many times, but from the beginning of the play and through the play, it's important to recognize that Hamlet is going through a time of mourning, that the death of his father is totally affecting the way that he sees the world. When he first shows up in his first soliloquy, he talks about the world being an unweeded garden. Later in the play, you'll recall his "What a piece of work is man" speech, where he says men and human beings are noble and beautiful and like angels and like gods, and he knows that all these things are true. And yet, to him, he says, "What is this quintessence of dust?" To Hamlet, the world is seen through gray colored glasses. He's not seeing things as he knows they are. And he puts forward for us an important separation between reality and perception, that there is goodness in the world that Hamlet knows is real, but he can't see it right now because of the existential crisis that he's going through in this play. And his knowledge of that is very important because most of us aren't aware of that. Most of us just think, this is what I think, this is what I see, and this is what is. Hamlet says, I know that I'm in a space where I'm not to be trusting, not to be trusted. I can't really trust myself because I'm not myself right now. I'm seeing things differently than I otherwise should. Secondly, then, Hamlet also knows that he's out of his element. As a scholar, as a student, as someone who prides himself on his rationality, he knows that he's experiencing some things in this play that are proving to him the limits of his perception. To Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, he gives this kind of confusing line. He says, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space, were it not that I have bad dreams. So bounded in a nutshell, if you can imagine being shrunken down to some really, really small level and then having a nutshell around you, and that being this massive space. So you think about, and I'm a little out of my element here as well in talking about this, but from like seventh grade science, I remember them talking about how like the difference between, or the space between like the nucleus and like the electron field in a cell was like the size of a football field or something crazy like that. So if you could shrink everything down to like this microscopic level, there's like this massive space. But as we know, of course, that space, even though it seems super, super big, is not very big. And so Hamlet says, if I were to be bounded in a nutshell, I could say that according to my perception, I'm the king of infinite space, but I have bad dreams. And what Hamlet is saying there is, I have dreams of things that are outside of my own perception almost. I have dreams of things that suggest that there's more to the world than just the nutshell that I'm bounded in. And in this quote, Hamlet is discussing the limits of our perception. And the question is, are there things outside of our consciousness, and what do we do with those things? This is brought into even closer examination after Hamlet sees the ghost of his dad for the first time. If you had asked Hamlet and Horatio prior to Act 1, Scene 5, do you guys believe in ghosts? They would have said, of course not. We're students of philosophy. We think about rational things in the real world. We look at what happens in the natural world, and ghosts are the figments of people's imaginations or the work of an overwrought brain or things that crazy people see. It's not for serious-minded men and women. And yet they see this ghost. And so Hamlet says, there's more things than we thought. There's more things than are dreamt of in our philosophy. There's things existing in the world that we haven't even imagined yet. And what do you do with that? How do you respond to new information that shakes our understanding of the world? Historically, people react to those things in a couple ways, two ways that I'll look at primarily. You could respond to that with anger, denial, rejection. I'm so deeply entrenched in the way that I see the world that this new information is not going to sufficiently knock me off of my pre-existing worldview. I believe this to be true, and even if there's new evidence, that's not going to change my mind. We see this all the time, right? You talk to two people on different sides of an issue, present them with the exact same evidence, and the one side will say, well, of course that evidence makes sense because of this way that I view the world. And the other side will say, well, of course that evidence makes sense because of this way that I view the world. And we're constantly not allowing the evidence itself to shake our understandings. The way that Hamlet responds to this is the response of a truly educated person. He expresses humility. There's more than I've understood. There's more to learn than what I've learned. He will, throughout the course of the play, express doubt about the things that he has held to be true. He'll wonder, is this actually real? The stuff that I've always thought is true, is it true? And this will prompt him to an intellectual exploration, to a kind of research to understand what is actually the truth, what is actually the way that I should live given this new information that has shaken my previous understanding of the world.